Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Knight. I'm a veterinary professor of animal welfare and a veterinary specialist in animal welfare accredited in most jurisdictions where that's possible. And I'm going to be talking about how to use animal welfare science to win animal welfare related legal cases. I've been involved, thankfully, in a couple of very interesting legal cases in the last few years. In this first case here, the famous British naturalist Chris Packham was initially awarded £90,000 in damages, but further awarded another £400,000 as an interim payment towards costs in a libel case that he had taken out against the editor and one of the writers, in particular, of the Country Squire magazine, which is widely read by members of the Countryside Alliance in the United Kingdom, which is a pro-hunting organisation. So Chris Packham had been appealing to his supporters for funds to support the care of some tigers which had actually been rescued from a Spanish circus and were being housed in the Wild Heart Sanctuary in the Isle of Wight. And Chris had made claims that the welfare of the tigers had been harmed by their time in the circus, and the conditions in the circus were contrary to good welfare for these circus tigers. So the defendants in this case had alleged that Chris's claims were in fact lies, and that his attempts to raise funds to support the care of these tigers was essentially fraud. So Chris brought this legal case and was very successful. I was called in as an expert witness in this case to examine the scientific evidence concerning the welfare of tigers within circuses. And it turned out to be one of the highlights of my career so far. I was cross-examined for 2 hours by an opposition barrister in the High Court. And the justice ruling in his final judgment said this: the expert evidence left him with the firm overall impression that the modern peer-reviewed literature supports the proposition that it is indeed inherently harmful to tigers for them to be kept in a travelling circus. And he refers to actually the 5 domains model of animal welfare assessment, which I'll come back to a little later. He also noted that I had considered the medical history of the tigers in this case and concluded that they had suffered from a range of serious and debilitating mutilations, injuries, and other disorders. The other case that I have recently been involved in that's been very significant for animals was this case here, in which a company called Big Dutchman, one of a very small number of companies worldwide, has been developing colony cages for meat chickens. Colony cages are already widely used for laying hens, producing eggs, but are not widely used for meat chickens, which are normally raised in giant windowless sheds or barns on a littered floor. So the company here, the Big Dutchman company, has been producing colony cages in which to house these growing meat chickens, enabling these cages to be stacked 4 or 5 tiers high within a shed, thereby getting greater productivity from the same floor space, which should be more profitable to companies. However, of course, there's a major concern that because the spatial restriction is even more severe for birds in these cages than it would be in a very crowded barn, there's even less opportunity for them to satisfy their highly motivated behavioural needs to scratch, forage, dust bathe, explore their surroundings, stretch their wings, and so on, and of course to perch as well. The animal rights organisation in this case was Animals Now in Israel, and they said this when they first learned that the Ministry of Agriculture in Israel was considering permitting the use of colony cages in Israel, which wasn't currently legal. The issue became a top priority for them because it had the potential to worsen the conditions of all the chickens in the meat industry in their country, which was over 200 million animals just in Israel each year. They said the current system of barn housing is not flawless, but at least the animals had the ability to demonstrate some of their natural behaviours. And now in their campaign they used public pressure, legal tools and also political tools to try to campaign against the introduction of these cages. They said in their statement here they're pleased that recently the Ministry of Agriculture decided to discontinue the research funded into the use of these cages in Israel due to concerns regarding these animals' welfare and to freeze further use of these cages. Now, at one point I was called in to produce an expert statement for potential use in court about the welfare of the birds in these cages. And the Ministry of Agriculture said this: the results of their initial study raised suspicions of real harm to the welfare of chickens that cast doubt as to the adaptation of methods to Israel. And that was after the expert witness statement was presented to them, actually. Animals now said the decision is a major achievement in their struggle against the use of colony cages in the country and now working to ensure it's set as a permanent policy. And they cited the importance of the research and expert opinion in helping the Ministry of Agriculture understand the science on this issue and come to the conclusion that they did. This is particularly important, I think, because meat chickens are the livestock animal species that is most used globally. You can see in the chart here that there are more than 70 billion of these animals that are farmed and killed worldwide each year. So because this new housing system has the potential to be more profitable, stacking cages 4 or 5 tiers high within a single shed, it is likely that attempts will be made to roll this system of production out globally, actually. And as you can see, that has the potential to affect more livestock animals than any other housing system, I think, or species that could be affected. The numbers of animals are absolutely vast, so it's incredibly important that this system, which would result in poorer welfare for those chickens, be disallowed in as many jurisdictions as possible. So I'm going to talk about the essential elements of the expert witness statements that help to win these cases. But firstly, I'm going to talk about how not to win these cases. And this was actually informed by the expert witness opinion on the other side in the Circus Tigers legal case in the High Court in the United Kingdom in 2023. So how not to do this well, I think, is to rely upon simply one's own personal opinion to a high degree, even though experts are supposed to be giving their expert opinion, to ignore modern conceptualizations of animal welfare and how that should be assessed, to very incompletely discussing the relevant scientific evidence relating to the issue, to make claims that are exaggerated, cannot be substantiated, or are simply incorrect, and incredibly, to provide your attack points to the opposition in advance. What actually happened in this case was that the expert statement was supplied by the other side and by our side, and all shared prior to the legal case, as is normal. Once the other side received our expert statement, the opposition expert behaved in a way that would be consistent with being very upset, and then submitted a further 27-page statement and sought to have that admitted as a further expert statement to try to rebut many of the points that I had made in my expert statement. Of course, they were not allowed to submit that further statement because they had already submitted their expert statement. But in that further statement, many points were made to attempt to rebut the points that I had made, and we were completely unsurprised, therefore, when I stood up in the High Court and the opposition barrister kept on saying, "My clients have informed me that such and such," and these various points were then rolled out. Incredibly, they had been provided to us in advance, as I said, and of course we had obvious responses ready for those points. That was a gift, which certainly is not normal. However, the other points would be more common errors, I think, that might occur within expert witness statements. Conversely, this I think is how to win animal welfare legal cases. To use an updated model of what animal welfare is and how it should be assessed, and in particular the 5 domains model of animal welfare, and I'll come to that shortly. To review the relevant scientific evidence using systematic review methodology, and I'll explain what that is as well. And then to discuss the results under each of the domains of animal welfare, how the scientific evidence informs our understanding of the welfare of animals generally, and also then the welfare of animals in the specific case under consideration based on the evidence in that case. And of course, don't make the errors that were made in the circus tigers case involving exaggeration, claims that can't be substantiated or are simply incorrect. So what is the 5 domains model of animal welfare? Well, many people will have heard of the 5 freedoms, the importance of trying to ensure that animals have freedom from hunger and thirst, from discomfort, from pain, injury and disease, from fear and distress, and the freedom to exercise natural behaviours. These 5 freedoms have been considered the basis for policy and legislation aimed at protecting animals in many regions of the world for a very long time, and they're the most best-known model of animal welfare. However, they have also been critiqued academically because it's not possible, for example, to provide an animal with freedom from hunger permanently, because such an animal would have no motivation to eat, most probably, and would therefore die. So actually, total freedom from any of these states is not necessarily desirable or achievable. Secondarily, we want more nowadays than simply freedom from negative states. We want the freedom to experience positive states as well. And the 5 freedoms mostly focus on freedoms from negative states. Modern understanding of animal welfare recognizes that animals are capable of experiencing positive states, and we should aim to provide them the opportunity to do this, as well as simply to avoid negative states. So, accordingly, the 5 domains model has superseded the 5 freedoms model. The 5 domains model asks us to consider each of these domains here, and if any of these domains is substantially compromised, it can be inferred that the environment is harmful and not suitable for the animal. So with respect to nutrition, for example, we would want not only the freedom from the negative state of hunger and thirst, but also the freedom to experience positive states of enjoyment, satisfaction, with respect to diet, maybe freedom of choice, and so on. So that's what modern understanding of animal welfare is and how it should be assessed. Now, the old way that these cases might have been argued, or the way that they might be argued if there are not the resources to conduct a thorough assessment of welfare, is simply to rely upon personal opinion, including the opinions of experts. Within the world of medical practice, reliance upon expert opinion formed the basis for so-called dogmatic medicine, which has been superseded in modern times by so-called evidence-based medicine. And that occurred because there was a recognition that the opinions even of experts can vary significantly. And indeed, it's not possible for any one expert to fully appreciate the totality of collected medical experience. It's only possible really for them to rely upon their personal lifetime and career experience, and that is by definition incomplete. So, we've recognised that there are limitations, certainly within medical practice and policy making, about reliance solely upon the opinions of experts. And within that world, it's well understood that there is a so-called hierarchy of evidence, and the least reliable forms of evidence, those at the bottom, are considered to be the ideas or opinions simply of experts, perhaps editorials, perhaps anecdotes about what might have occurred in certain medical cases. A little bit more reliable are publications describing individual cases. There might be cases of how a patient went through a disease process or responded to a treatment course. There might be reports of cases developing over time. A bit more reliable is when you examine cohorts of patients. So we're no longer looking at individuals, we now have significant numbers, and you take a cross-section at one point in time. A little bit more reliably might be where you have cohorts that have been given a test medication and controls that have not been given any medication, and you compare outcomes between those two groups. If you do this with individuals, it's a case control study. If you use significant numbers, you're looking at cohorts. When you use randomization to assign subjects to treatment groups or control groups, then you're talking about a randomized controlled trial, an RCT. And where you bring together significant numbers of these and you systematically review the scientific literature to make sure that you've included all of them, and you collectively analyze the data in a meta-analysis, you've now reached the top of the hierarchy of evidence, and this is considered to provide gold standard evidence about clinical issues. Systematic reviews are considered to provide gold standard evidence because they aim to ensure that no relevant scientific evidence is missed, and they do that by searching the scientific databases to ensure that all relevant publications are identified. This may result in retrieving large numbers of studies, sometimes more than 1,000. If it's not possible to examine all of them because there are too many, then any subsets that are selected must be selected via randomization or some similarly methodical and partial means to eliminate any bias during the selection of subsets. It's important to be very transparent about the criteria used to include and exclude studies. And the aim is to, therefore, synthesize together and appraise all good quality scientific evidence relevant to the research question. And by doing this so rigorously and impartially, the results ought to be able to be published in a peer-reviewed biomedical journal. This has been recently taken further with the PRISMA guidelines. That stands for the preferred reporting of items for inclusion within systematic reviews and meta-analyses. The aim is to ensure that the methods and results should be reported in sufficient detail to allow users to assess their trustworthiness, and so on. In particular, it requires use of a flowchart such as the one here that we used in our Circus Tigers legal case expert report. Initially, you describe the number of essentially records that you retrieve from the main scientific databases that you have used. Many of those will be duplicates, so you eliminate those and you have a number that are left. You screen those by titles, you eliminate ones that seem to be not relevant, then you further screen by abstracts, you have a final set of full text articles that are included within the review, and so on. Here's an example of how these are organised. This is from the Circus Tigers expert witness statement. At the end, you can see which of the 5 welfare domains the various studies assessed. And what you do then is you go through all that collected evidence. We had 42 relevant studies that we found in this particular case, and you describe what the evidence says about the use of animals in that setting, in this case circuses, under each domain there. And you then look at the evidence in the particular case to do likewise. It's important to acknowledge the limitations of the study. In this case, we noted that only 3 studies specifically assessed the welfare implications of tigers in circuses directly. The majority were actually studies conducted in zoos. Data has been inferred to support the conclusions about circus tigers, given that conditions in circuses are usually worse than those within zoos. We also said that in accordance with best practice, 2 databases were used for the systematic review. They're among the largest and best in the life and health sciences, minimising the chance that we might have missed any relevant evidence. But we acknowledge a small chance that a tiny number of studies might have been excluded that might have been relevant. However, we have explained that the additional searches we conducted partly by looking at the reference lists of the retrieved articles can be expected to have located virtually all additional studies of significance. And so we said we have strong confidence in the body of scientific evidence that we analysed and the conclusions that can be inferred from it. We then provided key points in our conclusions, being the number of studies we've examined, their scope and time span, the conclusions about the effects in each of these 5 welfare domains, and here's the examples from the circus tigers case. The preponderance of scientific evidence actually refutes rather than supports, as the opposition had claimed, the position that it's not inherently harmful to tigers to keep them in circuses. And the overwhelming weight of the evidence didn't contradict the general welfare concerns indicated by the scientific literature, which consistently demonstrated the conditions in which the circus tigers were kept and transported as often harmful to them. I'd like to acknowledge my fabulous research assistant who helped me with this case. Emily Davies helped me in the circus tigers case in particular. The naturalist Chris Packham, who was willing to take this case. Lee Day solicitors, who were fantastic in representing Mr. Packham and liaising with myself. Our opposition expert witness, Emeritus Professor Ted Friend, for providing a statement that was so easy to rebut and that was so helpful in demonstrating what not to do, as I've noted here in this presentation. And of course, Animals Now in Israel, who engaged us in the previous chickens case. If anyone would like further information, the subsequent published open access article about the welfare of chickens in colony cages is now available to support campaigns globally on this issue and can be found on my website at that location. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. You can reach me through my website, andrewknight.info. Thank you very much.